Max Verstappen firmly back in business in Miami. No real surprise there. It's a Max sort of circuit, some nice medium speed corners, pretty dramatic changes of direction where he's got to get that nice little bit of flat car where he can do that. You can see that noticeably in Sector 1 going through the S's there. You can just see how little he's loading up the car with the change of direction. A lot of other drivers, you can see them leaning on it both sides. Max is just managing to keep it incredibly stable through there. That's what it looks like. Of course, what's going on behind the wheel and in the footwell area is another story. A lot of it is modulation with the pedal against steering load, and he's just feeling the car beautifully. Yeah, a couple of moments. New surface at Miami, and all the teams getting used to that. At the beginning of FP1 on the hard tyre, and Red Bull were out on the hard, some of the other teams out on the medium. Very little grip on the hard tyre, but the track did pick up grip in FP2. The temperatures came down a little bit, and there were some very quick times out there to be found. Lando Norris was quickest for a while, purple in the McLaren. Yeah, haven't seen that for a while. So quite an eventful day. A shunt for Nico Hülkenberg. Just after he'd gone really well in FP1, he'd put in a very quick time in the Haas and hit the wall. Won't hold it against Nico. He's done such a great job in recent times. But inevitably, when you're trying that hard, and he is a bit of a reflexy driver, bit of a car control-y driver, yeah, these things will happen. And Kevin Magnussen kind of repaid the compliment in FP2. Didn't actually hit anything very hard, but also had quite a big lose between the guardrail. And then the long run towards the end of FP2 kind of foreshortened. They did get in one lap after the red, but the red came out because Charles Leclerc went off, did one of his Friday things. We're assuming it's only a Friday thing in the Ferrari. Didn't look very nice. Bit of an inelegant lose through the long left-hander in Sector 1. Back end got away, and all you can say is he kind of overcorrected. It just bit and turned the car sharp right on a left-hander and head on into the Tech Pro barrier. That was the end of his running. He'd looked pretty good, but Carlos Sainz looked really good in the other Ferrari. Anyway, kind of getting ahead of ourselves because, as I say, it was Max Verstappen kind of back in business as usual, though he did have his own share of dramas. Early on, through most of FP1, he couldn't get the headrest hands situation right. Quite unusual to hear a driver talking about that. And Max actually talks about that quite a lot. It's not the first time he's talked about the headrest position and how he likes to feel in the car, but Max particularly sensitive to that. And Red Bull had to work really hard to get the hands system to work correctly, but they did. And he kind of put things back into perspective because Mercedes, would you believe, having had quite a few dramas, well, particularly with George Russell, he had a vibration coming through the wheel and he lost most of FP1 while they got that sorted. Then he went out and he was behind the 8 ball. He was running mediums and everybody had gone to softs. But right at the end, both he and Lewis went out on softs when everybody else was on mediums. And they were quickest, 1-2. They ended FP1 1-2. So you can imagine what that felt for Mercedes to be going into FP2 like that, to go into the weekend like that. Relatively strong showings in Melbourne and Baku, and now 1-2 in FP1. But then very, very quickly it was put into perspective when Max finally got a decent run. He'd messed up his Sector 1 as well as the headrest thing in FP1. So let's have a look at those soft tyre runs. Max 27.9. Had a couple of goes to get down to the 27.9, but very impressive lap. Just super clean. Nothing ragged about the lap at all. Nothing ragged about the Red Bull. Just incredible combination of grip and top speed. You can see that 340 kilometers an hour. Sergio Perez also 340 kilometers an hour. It's a long straight in Miami, very, very quick. And the next quickest in a straight line was, let's have a look, 336. Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso 331 in the other, Charles Leclerc 333 in the Ferrari, Esteban Ocon 335 in the Alpine. But they're all kind of gasping for air in trying to stay with the Red Bull in top speed. Really impressive to be that quick around the lap and to be that quick in terms of terminal velocity. Just shows the overall aero efficiency of that Red Bull Honda Red Bull powertrain combination package. Just superb. Carlos Sainz, say, looked pretty good in the Ferrari. Had a couple of goes as well. 3.29 though is a bit of a worry. 3.33 for Charles Leclerc. So they're looking at, what is that? 8 kilometers an hour slower. So even if they're somewhere near the Red Bulls in the first few laps of the race, as we saw in Baku, It's not going to be that difficult, famous last words, for a Red Bull driver, either Max or Sergio, to breeze past under DRS. And there are 3 DRS zones, should remind you, here in Miami. So, Ferrari second and third and Charles Leclerc ending up in the wall. Obviously, not that easy a car to drive. They're taking on as much downforce as they can. 329, 333 against 340. Fernando Alonso, 28.6. Good job by Aston Martin with that new rear wing, really getting it to work. The rear wing we saw in Baku, much quicker in top speed now relative to their nearest opposition. So no longer can we say Aston Martin really slow in a straight line. Looking pretty good. 331, Lance Stroll 336. That puts them fair and square with just ahead of the Mercedes, you got to say. And until now, Mercedes, in terms of that sort of very high midfield, if that's the right description for them, have been the quickest team out there. But now look at that. That's a really good performance from Aston Martin, a good all-round package car now. And Fernando Alonso, 28.6. We'll get onto the long runs in a minute. And Lando Norris, to some extent, again, the story of the day, as I say, really quick. When he went out on soft tyres, 28.7, 331. And again, McLaren, really good job with the mods they've been making to that car. Top speed and a reasonable amount of grip now. And that was kind of echoed by Oscar Piastri, the rookie, who's also looking very good. Again, on the long runs, he was very impressive, I thought. Lewis Hamilton, in and out of the pits, quite long periods when we didn't see him on track. 332 in a straight line. He'll be disappointed with that, obviously, and 28.8. Now, you could say, Ferrari 28.3, Mercedes 28.8, that's about where they would be, maybe, probably. But look at that, you got an Aston Martin and a McLaren ahead of him, and that's not progress as far as Mercedes are concerned. You can say that is for sure, having ended FP1 1-2, and they end up there. And George Russell on the soft tyres didn't get a run. He got, I think it was Lando Norris actually, was on the inside. He didn't balk him. It was just right there where a bit of road that George wanted to use. 29.2, 333, way down the lists. Lance Stroll 28.9, good job. Esteban Ocon 28.9. 335. So 28.9, 335 puts him right there with the sort of Lance Stroll, second Aston Martin type speed, and just away from the Aston Martins and pretty near the Mercedes now. Quite a good performance from Alpine, although Pierre Gasly, again, lots of trouble in and out of the pits and very fragmented 2 sessions for Pierre Gasly. He'll be frustrated by that's for sure. And Alex Albon, I think a good bellwether performance there from Williams, 29.0. Historically super quick in a straight line, but look at that, 335. They're quicker than Mercedes, but not that much ahead of Aston Martin and McLaren. So that just shows how Aston and McLaren have made improvements, I think, in top speed. So let's have a look now at what they did when they went out with fuel in the car. As I say, it was foreshortened by Charles Leclerc going off right at the end. But Max Verstappen, look at that run by Max on medium tyres. Just brilliant. 32.4, 32.5, 32.6, 31.9, 31.9. That the last lap of all of them was after the Leclerc shunt. So, end of story, really. Sergio Perez, more incidents, more sort of running out of road and other issues. 32.1, 33.8, 32.2. Never got into the 31s. But not far away, very good wingman job, as we predicted on this sort of circuit. And, of course, if anything goes wrong with Max, Perez in a brilliant place to take over the win for him. Carlos Sainz, the more impressive of the 2 Ferrari drivers today, both out on mediums in the long run. 33.2, 33.0, 33.1. Sorry, a bit of a typo there. 33.4. Bit late at night it is, of course. And 3.05. You can see again, top speeds not that far away when it comes to running without DRS, but that's because they're going slower and they're not in the DRS zone when they're running with heavy fuel loads. But you can see the difference in lap times there. They're 33s and Red Bull easy 32s really, and high 31s in Max's case. So there's the story. Charles Leclerc, emphasizing that 34.3, 33.5, 33.5. And again, top speeds commensurate in this situation, but DRS and with lighter fuel loads, the Red Bulls are just going to disappear. Alonso, different story, 33.1, 33.4, looks pretty impressive on fuel, bearing in mind he's running the hard tyre, and then right at the end went out on the soft after the Charles Leclerc incident, did 31.9. Not sure how much fuel he would have had in the car there. It doesn't really matter if he's on the soft tyre, 31.9. Probably quite a lot of fuel just to get a feel for it. And a good day at the races for Fernando Alonso. And George Russell, I put the two Mercs in there. George Russell and Lewis both out on mediums, but relatively late getting it together. So not really out there when, say, Max was out there in the groove. So 33.7, 33.1 for George, 32.6, 32.7 for Lewis, who's quicker. Is he running less fuel? Who knows? But if he is running the same amount of fuel as Max, obviously that's a pretty good performance from Mercedes. And you'd have to say, from Lewis's point of view, the car looking a lot more competitive with fuel in it than, on the soft tyre with light fuel. I mean, wouldn't have said that after FP1, of course, but after FP2, relative to where Red Bull, the real pace is, you got to say Mercedes in trouble. But on the medium tyre with fuel, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt at the moment. Yeah, they got lots of fuel in that car, 32.6, 32.7. That's kind of, Max when he's not absolutely on the limit. So potentially Mercedes maybe will have some sort of race on Sunday. No sprint this weekend, so we can just talk about it in a normal way. FP1, FP2, FP3 Saturday morning, and then qualifying, and then, of course, the race on Sunday. Anyway, over now to Shubham Sangodkar, who's over in India. I chatted to him after FP1 just to get his take on some of the updates, some of the interesting things that the teams are doing as the season begins to gather some sort of pace.
When it comes to the Mercedes, they have got like a front wing trim. And you can see these trims, they've been, Ferrari got them in Jeddah, and then you saw the Alpine Extreme cutout last race in Baku. And usually you see teams get this front wing trims wherever there's a high speed sensitivity. So wherever teams are going to run like a different rear wing level, what usually happens is if you go a little bit lower downforce, then the center of pressure starts moving forward. So your car becomes quite pointy. So you have to lose a little bit of front load. And teams usually do this by changing the flap angle, right? But sometimes you can run into a situation where this is not good enough. So teams tend to trim their front wings. So Mercedes have basically got a trim option onto their front flap, which would allow them to kind of balance the car. And it's really interesting because the trims are, when you look at them, they look a bit unusual. And that's because of Article 3.9.1H, which basically says that your minimum radius of curvature has to be 200 millimeters. So that kind of limits the way teams can trim the flap itself. Well, Ferrari's got their real first update onto the car. So they've got a new flow completely. The official communication says that it's a new front, mid, and a new diffuser geometry. And they say that they're trying to reduce losses. Well, if you really try to read into what might be happening aerodynamically, what I think is happening is, for them to commit to an entire flow, there must be good amount of changes happening. So I think what they mean when they're trying to say that they're trying to reduce losses is the vortex strength and the health of the vortex that is traveling through the floor. They might have optimized it to a way that it's healthier, and also the vortex merging process. So, like every strake lands up shedding a discrete vortex, and then they merge together. And when that merging mechanism itself is quite healthy or quite lossy, depending on how it happens. And now that makes a big difference, because as this vortices go into the diffuser, if it's not healthy enough, the diffuser expansion will not be supported by this vortex structures. And what is really interesting is that if they are able to make the structures healthier, then can they run lower rear ride heights, which might help them, have an effect on top speeds, like we've been discussing with Red Bull being able to run low, as James Ellison has mentioned.
Red Bull, do we see anything on the Red Bull amidst that new livery they're running?
No, not really. Actually, there was some pictures floating around, which was basically a couple of reflection game that even I fell for initially, that I thought they brought an update, but I think they're just planning to optimize. The Baku sprint weekend didn't really allow teams to optimize their package and understand their package well. So I think Red Bull got their big update last weekend, and they'll just spend this weekend trying to understand and optimize that update.
And Aston Martin looked to be a little bit quicker in a straight line in DRS areas anyway.
Yeah, I think this is kind of coming to the update that Aston Martin got on their rear wing last weekend. And they were not able to really show it during the whole sprint weekend because of the shenanigans that went on. But FP1 kind of showed that their top speeds are quite close to Mercedes. Like I've got the Alonso 335, Russell 335, Stroll 336. So we might actually see the main weakness of the Aston Martin, not being their main weakness anymore, depending on how they go and set up their car going into this weekend. So AlphaTauri have got a new mirror housing in which they have a winglet underneath, pretty much similar to the winglet they have on top. And this is kind of the boat tailing effect, where you try to close the wake of the mirror itself, because the wake of the mirror lands up being lossy and lands up being attached. It goes to the rear half of the car. So basically, by closing down that wake, it kind of gives you a cleaner flow to the rear end. And there's something interesting that teams try to do here is because you have two winglets, one on top and one at the bottom, you'll end up creating like a counter-rotating pair of vortices, which can help you to outwash the wake of the tire. So you have cleaner flow to the rear end, and you are able to outwash the front wheel wake. So it's an added benefit. So that's what AlphaTauri's got to this race.
That was it for Friday, but I should close by thanking everyone who voted in our poll on the YouTube channel. The question was, did you like the new sprint format in Baku? We had 12,000 votes in, and that is a lot of votes and much more than just your normal sample. So I'm going to be sending these results to Liberty, to F1, because I'm sure they'll be interested. I was going to say delighted to see them. I don't think they'll be delighted to see it at all. And the votes were split thus. 69% of you, 12,000 votes, said that they did not like the new sprint format in Baku. And of the remaining effective 30%, it was split 50-50 between the neutrals and the no's. So a pretty emphatic thumbs down for the new sprint format in Baku. So it'll be interesting to see if Formula One do start to make more changes, whether they just live with what they've got at the moment, or whether indeed they even rethink the whole business of the sprint weekend. We'll see. That's another story, of course, completely another story. And we'll be back again tomorrow, another late night viewing, sitting as we look back at qualifying for the Miami Grand Prix. Until then, many thanks to Shub. Take care. See you soon.